25 years ago, in September of 1996, the Nintendo 64 made its way from Japan to our shores here in North America. The console had a relatively short shelf life and not a lot of games, but it definitely made a lasting impact, although a lot of that was for the wrong reasons. Even though its competitors, the PlayStation and the Saturn, were both using CD formats at the time, the Nintendo 64 still used cartridges, like the Super Nintendo and the Nintendo before it, making it significantly more expensive to develop for third-party companies. Not to mention it was a lot more constrictive of a format for games than CDs were. CDs could hold much more info. It's probably a lot of why the Nintendo 64 didn't last that long over here, and probably a lot of why it didn't have a lot of third-party support either. In fact, during the console's lifespan, from 1996 to 2002, the Nintendo 64 only had 297 games released for it here in North America, and only about 100 more released overseas in markets like Japan and Europe, and one in Australia. That being said, it did have its bright spots. Why am I telling you this? Well, it's pretty simple. Welcome to the N64 Chronologue, a show in which we're going to take an in-depth look at every single game released for the N64 in North America. That's right, 297 games waiting to be looked at, waiting to be played and analyzed. It's going to take some time, for sure, but just bear with me. Every game in the library will get an episode, from Mario 64 to Turok, from Mario Parties 1, 2, and 3 to Body Harvest, to Tonic Trouble, to Superman. Every game will get its own day in the sun. Yes, even if only the episode is only 10 minutes long. Some episodes will be longer than others. For example, I don't see the need to expound the virtues of NFL Quarterback Club 2001 when I've already done Quarterback Club 2000, 99, 98. You see what I'm saying, right? And trust me, that will happen quite a bit, but there are definitely bright spots to look forward to. So with that, we have to start where it only makes sense to start, at the beginning, with the launch games. And what better place to start than, well, you probably thought I was going to start with Super Mario 64, didn't you? Yeah, everybody starts with that one when they're talking about the N64. But I promise you it'll be the next episode. No, actually, today I'm going to focus on a game that's actually a sequel, believe it or not. I present to you Pilotwings 64. Pilotwings 64 was released on the day the Nintendo 64 hit North American shelves, September 29, 1996. As I said, it's a sequel. The original game? Pilotwings on SNES, which, believe it or not, was also a launch title. Pilotwings on Super Nintendo was pretty innovative for its time as well, utilizing the Mode 7 chip in the SNES to make the graphics really pop off the screen. Mode 7, I hear you ask, what pray tell is that? Well, that's the chip in the SNES used to take flat pictures and stretch, bend, and rotate them in order to pass off things as 3D. For what it's worth, it worked pretty well, but some games relied on it just a little too much. Now, with Nintendo fully jumping into 3D, they needed a humdinger to get the system off the ground. And what better way to show off the graphical capabilities of the Nintendo 64 than the franchise that showed off the graphical capabilities of the Super Nintendo? And thusly, Pilotwings 64 was born. Responsible for the development of this game is Texas-based Paradigm Simulation, as well as Nintendo's EAD and R&D divisions. Funny enough, Miyamoto had his hand in this game as well, although not as much since he was also working on Super Mario 64 at the time. Understandable, Super Mario 64 is only one of the greatest platformers of all time. Of course Miyamoto needed to be at the helm of that one.
Even so, Pilotwings 64 is still an impressive piece of software.
Pilotwings 64 had a lot of things going for it. Loads of graphical processors designed to smooth out the look and the feel of the game, Z-buffering, which is a thing that allows the game to preload certain areas as necessary based on height and distance. Not to mention buttery smooth controls and a pretty chill soundtrack. Now all it needs is a point. Therefore, I suggest we talk about gameplay.
In the game, you control one of 6 different pilots, including Lark, who was modeled after Nintendo Power Magazine's longtime mascot Nestor, and Robin, who was called Hooter in Japan. Can't imagine why. Can't imagine why she was called Hooter in Japan. Couldn't even fathom the possible reason. The main challenges of the game involve piloting either a hang glider, a gyrocopter, or a rocket belt. Challenges start off fairly easy and get difficult as time goes on. The hang glider is the easiest to control of the 3 available aircrafts, made simple by the aforementioned butter-smooth controls. It's actually amazing how well the hang glider pilots. I was able to navigate through these rings and land safely on target without any trouble whatsoever. The rocket belt can be a bit tricky, but it's actually still fairly simple to control, and if used correctly, should never really even come close to running out of fuel. Hitting the middle of the target is probably the easiest with the rocket belt, as you can simply hover right over the center and continuously hit the Z button to float and gradually land on it. The gyrocopter can be difficult to control from time to time, but honestly, the most difficult thing about it is actually landing. Even then, the controls are tight enough that it shouldn't be a major problem. The game also has a bunch of bonus stages. My personal favorite is the cannonball, a round where you must fire your player character out of a cannon and attempt to get as close as you can to the center of a target. Hey, check it out, Mario replaced George Washington on Mount Rushmore. I guess Mario could never tell a lie either, right? There's also the Jumble Hopper, which gives you a pair of spring-loaded boots and tells you to hop your happy butt to a marked target on the other end of the map. Easier said than done, as you can see. Finally, there's Skydiving, in which you must do a bunch of formations and then parachute to the target below. Let's also not forget about Birdman, a mode that's basically free-flying mode. You're given wings, unlimited time, and no objectives in order to go flying around the various locations in the game.
I don't think there was any doubt in anyone's mind that Pilotwings 64 helped break new ground in the world of Nintendo, and it definitely did that in spades, showing off the capabilities of a brand new console by utilizing the very best aspects of it to deliver a solid game. Now the question is, does the game still hold up to this day?
Obviously, Nintendo 64 graphics leave a lot to be desired in 1996, as this was well before the expansion pack. Well before. Don't worry, we'll get there. Donkey Kong 64 is a little ways off, but we'll get there. Even so, and even without the expansion pack, this game still looks fairly gorgeous for N64 standards. It's definitely one of the better looking games on the N64, but that's kind of a low bar in the early years of the system. The gameplay is pretty compelling too, and more than makes up for it. The sound design is pretty top notch as well. All in all, Pilotwings 64 is a solid entry in the N64's library, and served its purpose well as a glorified tech demo.
The game sold pretty well too. Super Mario 64 was selling 1-to-1 with N64 consoles, which is pretty impressive considering it wasn't even a pack-in title. But Pilotwings 64 didn't actually do that badly either. 1 in 4 console purchases sold with a copy of the game. Strangely, the Nintendo 64 didn't actually have a pack-in title until Donkey Kong 64 came out, and that's only because of the expansion pack. Like I said, due time, we'll get there. A lot of my enjoyment of the game came from Cannonball, which I think is the most fun mode of the game, but honestly, there really isn't a segment of the game that isn't enjoyable, and honestly, the game is kind of a classic. It's held up a lot better than a lot of the games from 1996 and 1997, and we'll get to those pretty soon. Pilotwings 64 is definitely worth a playthrough, and even warrants some repeat playings here, as there are Easter eggs hidden within the game, such as Mario on Mount Rushmore, that you might miss the first time. I recommend you play Pilotwings 64 for yourself and see what you can find. That does it for this edition of the N64 Chronologue. On the next episode, we find ourselves in the midst of greatness as we take a look at the, quite possibly, greatest 3D platformer of all time, Super Mario 64. Until then, for the N64 Chronologue, I'm Mike saying, see you next time.